But next, we want to actually talk more with my next guest. So let's get some more of the background. After landing in Tel Aviv this morning, Rishi Sunak was welcomed by the President, Benjamin Netanyahu, who thanked him for the UK support of Israel.
Prime Minister Sunak, Rishi, I want to thank you for your solidarity, your clear, unwavering support from the minute this war began.
I want to share the deep condolences of the British people and stress that we absolutely support Israel's right to defend itself in line with international law, to go after Hamas, to take back hostages, deter further incursions, and to strengthen your security for the long term. Now, I know that you are taking every precaution to avoid harming civilians, in direct contrast to the terrorists of Hamas, which seek to put civilians in harm's way.
Meanwhile, as we've just been discussing, Scotland's First Minister Humza Yousaf has offered his support to the people in Gaza, tweeting, "Many don't want to leave and shouldn't have to, but for those displaced who want to leave, there should be a worldwide refugee scheme. Scotland is willing to be a place of sanctuary and be the first country to take those refugees," bearing in mind, of course, that his own parents-in-law are stuck in Gaza. So my question to you today is, well, what a surprise, with Scotland's First Minister calling for this scheme. Should Britain take in refugees from Gaza? Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. You can text on 87222. You can get in touch on X at TalkTV. Right, well, joining me right now is Major General Chip Chapman. He's former senior British military advisor. Good afternoon to you, Chip.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Let's just talk first of all about what Rishi Sunak is hoping to achieve after Joe Biden's visit to Israel. Is this, we were just discussing with Emma, is this just a sort of, hello, want to show my face, show support, give you a hug, say the right words, and then I'll be shipping out? Or is there a lot more going on behind the scenes that we're not seeing?
All of the above, really. I think it's important that the P5 members from the West go. And I think Macron will be going in the next 24, 36 hours. And I don't think any ground incursion will occur until that is there. So support to Israel is important from those countries. It also has a deterrent effect, possibly, on Iran and Hezbollah. And also, it's really how you prosecute the war, that message about either humanitarian aid or you're doing things right and Hamas just kills people indiscriminately. Because it is important that non-combatant immunity is seen to be acted upon and that there is humanitarian aid. And what is obviously interesting is that neither Egypt or Jordan, who border Gaza and Israel, the West Bank, don't want refugees from the Palestinian side. And the reason for that is partly to do with the philosophy of Hamas, their Muslim Brotherhood-inspired organization. The Muslim Brotherhood seeks to destroy what they see to be apostolic regimes in the Middle East, and that includes Egypt and Jordan. So they certainly don't want the hierarchy of Hamas. I suspect they don't want the refugees or the people from Gaza otherwise, although there could also be an economic part to that with a bribe to al-Sisi, the Egyptian president, from the Americans, because they do have a debt crisis at the moment.
Yeah, but again, this has been ongoing for many years, as Arab leaders all say, you know, weep, I would say, crocodile tears for the Palestinian people. And, OK, you can understand many of those people will say, well, I don't want to leave Gaza. This is my home. If we leave, we left Israel, but if we leave here now, we'll never come back. But, you know, I'll be honest with you, if it was me, my kids, and dealing with what they were dealing with under, you know, Hamas rule, I'd be saying, yes, please, I'd like to go to Saudi Arabia or Jordan or Egypt if that was an option. Those countries don't want to open up to people from Gaza. I think that's quite telling. Should Britain, this is the suggestion from the First Minister of Scotland, Humza Yousaf, is offering, you know, he says a global refugee scheme, and we should be offering, safe passage to people from Gaza. Do you think that would be a good idea?
Well, the first thing is that there are other Middle East countries they can go to. And indeed, most of the people who've been displaced by war in the last 12 years do go to those countries, particularly what happened in the disintegration of Syria. So many have gone to Turkey, 4 million, 1 million in Lebanon, 700,000 to Jordan. In terms of politics, it would be, very bad politics, I think, to open those people up. Now, of course, there are people with legitimate reasons to be here, in the same way that there were Israeli Brits who were killed in the attack. So there are those who are Palestinian British by the way that a thing called jus sanguinis works. That is, that there were people who may have been born outside of Palestine with relations in Gaza who would qualify to come on a legal scheme. That would be fine. What you don't want them to do is to become part of this sort of mass movement of the displacement of the global challenge that we see about migration wandering across many countries, coming to Britain that way. So if it is going to be done, it's going to be done in a very regulated manner, in the way, for example, that it was done in a very regulated manner with the people who came from Ukraine.
Yes, indeed. But again, there was a lot of support for people from Ukraine, and many people on the left were saying, well, British people are happy to welcome the people from Ukraine because they're European and they're white, but they weren't happy to welcome, say, Syrians or Afghans or Iraqis or Iranians, or in this case, Palestinians, basically because we're a horrible, nasty, racist country. That is what's being said. You know that's what the narrative is. I would say, given that, I mean, as much as we can trust surveys and polls, especially in a place like Gaza, you know, that 2/3 of people there, by all accounts, support Hamas. Hamas is a prescribed terrorist organisation. You know, it's as simple as that, whether the BBC accepts that or not. I'm just not sure that's a risk that most British people would be willing to take, whilst being very sympathetic to the plight of people currently displaced from their homes, bombed out, losing loved ones, struggling to get food and water. I think we all, if you're a moral human being, would want those people to be given the help that they absolutely have a right to. But that would perhaps stop for most of us at the point where someone goes, but let's bring them over here.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is true. A lot of it might not also be correct, but the perception is correct. So, for example, because of my counter-terrorist background, I can absolutely tell you that most of the terrorist attacks which we fear about people coming in are done from GB or dual nationals, and I couldn't find any example of one coming from a Palestinian. But there's a difficulty in looking at the statistics. So, for example, the last attack, which wasn't deemed to be a terrorist attack, the Liverpool attack, was someone who had a Jordanian passport, Iraqi-born, lived in the UAE. So the way that people describe themselves is not necessarily what transpires when you do have an attack. Yeah. There is that fear of people being attacked. Now, of course, the other real problem would be that we're likely to get into this problem if people do come. And even if they don't come, there's likely to be exacerbating tensions in the next few weeks, and maybe some what we call salad bar terrorism, when you have lone actors who get involved in malevolent activity, kill people or whatever, because they've taken the Palestinian issue, seen the problem of the hospital being whacked. It doesn't really matter if the truth is that it wasn't the Israelis. That's not the point for these people who dismiss the message in the messenger. So if we do see that, and we do see the threat level being raised, then we've got a problem for the future. That will lead to this reciprocal radicalisation from right-wing elements as well, and we'll have an exacerbating tensions in GB.
Indeed. Can I also ask you about comments about the BBC? It's an ongoing issue. We've got Robert Jenrick, the immigration minister. He's been criticising the BBC over their language about this. Lots of people criticising their language about Hamas, saying that the government, the British government and the Americans described them as a prescribed terrorist organisation, but not themselves calling the Hamas attack a terrorist attack by terrorists, which is clearly what it was, but also the reaction to that strike on the hospital in Gaza. We're told some 471 people, men, women and children, dead as a result of that. Again, we can't verify those figures independently, but the immediate rush by many, and including on-air BBC journalists who are seen and trusted across the Middle East to give this impartial, independent view, saying that it's impossible to think this could be anything other than an Israeli attack. Evidence has been presented by the IDF, which really does suggest, actually, it's very unlikely that it was an attack by the Israeli Defence Forces. We can't be sure. It certainly wouldn't make sense for them PR-wise, internationally, the day before Joe Biden was arriving. The evidence of no craters, the sort of damage that was caused, the imagery they produced suggesting it was a misfired Palestinian missile, I think is very persuasive. We're not 100% sure yet, but very persuasive. But the fact that President Isaac Herzog of Israel, in his meeting with Rishi Sunak this morning, chose to bring this up, chose to speak about the distortion of the facts, he says, from the BBC, and how difficult this was making, stirring up tensions in the Middle East. That is pretty significant, isn't it, for a foreign leader to be criticising the BBC for this?
Yeah, I think it is. There's 2 points really to that. So in Israel's operational concept for victory in 2020, they describe both Hamas and Hezbollah as diffuse rocket-based terror armies. That's what they are. They're not a terrorist organization or guerrilla organization. They're terror armies. Now, the problem that the BBC had is, A, of course, they're a terrorist organization and should be described as such. But secondly, the key thing in reporting, particularly in real time, is that if you are not accurate, we kind of say, this is from General Mattis, who I used to work for, that capturing the perceptions of foreign audiences will replace seizing terrain as the new high ground. And it doesn't matter if that is all wrong, that it wasn't the Israelis and 500 people didn't get killed. People won't change their view. That is a thing called belief perseverance, and leads, if you present them with the evidence, to them reinforcing their view. That's also psychologically known as a thing called the backfire effect.
Indeed.
And that's the problem. Having looked, for example, at Turkish media yesterday, it was Israel attacks hospital. Today, I looked again, and it was still Israel attacks the hospital, with confirmation bias, another psychological term, with people who are saying, no, it's still Israeli missiles, and getting their own experts in to confirm
once that narrative is there. Exactly. Again, I don't know, you don't know. We can only go with what evidence presented to us. But it does look that it's not likely that was what happened. But again, the BBC has an extra responsibility. To many other people around the world, it represents truth, it represents impartiality, and it represents Britain. So it's very significant. Thank you so much for joining us. Major General Chip Chapman covered a lot of ground there. Thank you for that.